but if you can put up with that, it'll be cool. So she came down with a variety of outfits, and we knocked out 7 giant Polaroids of her in one day. And the camera has half an inch of depth of field at f/45. Okay?
Yeah.
So you have to be extremely careful with this camera. You can't focus the camera either. You have to focus your subject. So Jenny did an amazing job. I mean, she's in the dark. You have to work camera obscura. About 30,000 watt-seconds of flash. So you pull the cap off the camera in a dark room, and she's on point in a dark room with a half an inch of depth of field, and she did an amazing job. But I found I had kind of a connection to this camera. So when 9/11 happened, I went to have a 25-year, at that point, 25-year history with Time Warner. And so I went to Time Warner. I bypassed all the magazines and all the picture editors. I went right to the top. And I sent them an email, and I said, look, I can do this project. And I wanted to use the giant Polaroid camera because everybody was talking about people who had been heroic in 9/11 and giants, all that sort of stuff. So I thought this camera would be a good instrument. And I mean, long story short, the project went on for 3 weeks right after 9/11. I photographed over close to 300 people in giant Polaroid. And the giant Polaroid, when you pull it, it's just like a Polaroid. 90 seconds later, you peel the cover off of it, and you have a print that is roughly about 1 meter by 2.5 meters. And it just lays on the floor. So it's the person. It's the life-size person. So and incredible detail, all that stuff. So anything in between, I think the camera stands in service to the job. Your approach stands in service to the job. Some photographers are different. Some photographers have such an overriding style that they impose their style on everything, which is fine too. That's an approach. I've been an assignment photographer, so I don't really have a style. I become what the job needs me to become. Like every photographer out there right now, struggle to continue to get work that we like. We have a big commercial project in the middle of the summer for Federal Express, and I enjoy that. It's a challenge. I mean, here's the thing. You're photographing trucks and boxes moving through the streets. Okay, how to do that well, how to express that artistically. I work with wonderful people, and you work incredibly hard. Okay, but that type of commercial job, I also like to take that on because that is that kind of pressure is a fire you can pass through that is a good thing for your exterior as a photographer. Because when we're on the streets for a client like that, I'll have 30, 40 people all waiting for me to generate the work, and there's money being spent like crazy. So that's a lot of pressure. So that's a good thing to accept as a photographer, because then you really test yourself on that level. It's not just you and a camera wandering the streets, and if you miss a picture, nobody knows. I think for photography, first and foremost, to be quote-unquote good, it's got to reach people. It's got to involve people emotionally. It's got to grab. And it could be flawed, in other ways. It could be flawed compositionally, could be flawed in terms of technique. How many great pictures have you seen, that front page of a newspaper, can't look away from it, or something like that, or a historically important photograph, and it's flawed on some level. Maybe the composition's off, maybe this is that, but there's a human element or a drama to that photograph that makes you look at it, despite other things. So once you look at a really powerful photograph that gets to you, you're different for the rest of your life. And you're not even aware of it. It's almost like seismic. It's interior, but there's been a shift. There's been an emotional shift. It's almost like counterpoint in music, that when you look at that photograph, there's an emotional shift that occurs, and you will never be the same again. And that, to me, is the power of photography. That's the power of the frozen moment. There's 3 main things a photograph has to carry, and it has to involve people emotionally, has to have emotional impact, and it has to have pictorial impact. So in other words, it's got to succeed as a picture, And then lastly, or actually equally, it has to bear the weight of information. It can't just be eye candy. It can't just be a pretty shot. I did a job years ago. I photographed every breed of dog at the Westminster Dog Show at Madison Square Garden. So every breed of dog in 6:17 panorama, and we built a horizontal stage and had curtains, and we would photograph up to 7 dogs in a row, and we built a giant grid, a 4-page gatefold for Life magazine that had every breed of dog. It was all photoshopped together afterwards. And I was at this panorama camera. We had these lights and everything up, and I got a squeaky toy, and I'm trying to get these dogs' attention, and I'm barking at them. I'm going, ruff, ruff, and I turned to my assistants. I said, "It's come to this, I'm fucking barking at these dogs, so they took a little gaffer tape note, and they taped it on the back of the 617 camera, and I saw it every time I walked up to the camera, and they just said, "You said yes." So every time I went to the camera, there was this little reminder, "You said yes. You said you would do this. All right, you would photograph these dogs." And it's true. Once you put the phone down and you've said, "Okay, I'll do this job," then their mission becomes your mission. Area of photography I grew up in, magazine work, is so constricted now. There's so much pressure, there's so little money, there's so much desperation. Photo editors just don't have the time, nor do they have the leeway to risk a job on a young photographer. When I came up photographically, Tom Kennedy put me out in the field for the Geographic, and I failed. My first job, they didn't like it at all. He sent me out again. And then the next job I did in the path of that sort of learning curve, that's when I clicked in. Now, photo editor won't do that, because their job is on the line. And they're spending money. They've got this tiny little budget. They're not going to spend it on somebody who is they're unsure of. So I got mentored, sometimes very fiercely, by photographers, editors who spent time with me and pushed me to become something better, whatever that may have been. Okay, not too many people are doing that now. So, at least on a personal level, the community of the internet has largely replaced that. So, I feel if I can hopefully influence people to just become better photographers, that's something I can give back.
So, how do we get National Geographic photographers? Simple questions.
Careful what you wish for. There's a Slovenian edition, right, of the Geographic. Yep. It's a tough path. It's a very tough path, especially now, because, as I said, they're not going to risk budget on a new face a great deal of the time. So it's not impossible. The best training, always, to become a journalist, to become a magazine photographer or a National Geographic photographer, the best training available to you is to be a newspaper photographer. Newspaper wire surface photography, to me, remains the best training available to anybody who wants to tell stories with a camera. Because you have to push yourself, you're shooting 4 or 5 jobs a day, you have to improvise, you have to think fast. You've got an editor who, again, doesn't care, just has a hole in the Metro front that they need filled by 3 o'clock that afternoon, and the push is on, the pressure is on. And that's really good training, because you have to remain nimble, okay, physically and mentally, to do this right. Okay, my very first staff job was this weird job at ABC Television in New York, and 4 photographers were given a test. We were given 2 days to complete 3 assignments. I completed the 3 assignments, and I also did a job for the New York Times during the same time. The other 3 photographers didn't get the jobs done, and some of them only turned in 1 job. It was like, wasn't enough time. I needed more time to think about it. I got hired. I got hired.